Si la paz es elusiva, que alguien me lo diga.
La Plaza de las Tres Culturas was built on the ruins of the ancient Aztec city of Tlatelolco. It is a place in Mexico City with history, a lot of history.
Que se detenga la violencia.
Unfortunately, the history of this place has been written in blood. First came the great massacre of the War of Tenochtitlan and Tlatelolco. Then came the conquest, and after that, the arrival of the Spanish conquerors. Great epidemics, one of them the cocolistli. Cocolistli was a disease that affected the natives of New Spain.
Hagamos hoy conciencia.
Between 1519 and 1600, the indigenous population of Mexico went from between 15 and 30 million to 2 million. In 1968, the massacre of October 2nd, and later in 1985, the devastating earthquake in Mexico City. According to the myth, after the founding of Tenochtitlan in 1325, Huitzilopochtli ordered the Mexica to spread out over the four worlds. In this way, in 1337, a dissatisfied group settled between the lake and the reed beds, on a terrace or sandy point. According to other sources, the Mexicans lived together in Tenochtitlan for about 12 years, and on the 13th, some separated and founded Tlatelolco, Chiliyacac.
Si la paz es elusiva, que alguien me lo diga.
The three cultures represented are pre-Hispanic, whose ruins are still partially visible, the Viceroyalty, represented by the Church of Santiago Tlatelolco, and the modern one, the one that stands out the most, and whose complex in its time was the largest in Latin America, with three sections: Independence, Reform, and Republic. 102 buildings, about 12,000 apartments, about 600 shops, schools, theaters. In other words, a city within a city.
Que se apague el sufrimiento.
Tlatelolco means in the pile of sand, and it was the largest commercial area at that time. Everything that was produced thousands of miles away was found here.
Si la paz es elusiva, que alguien me lo diga.
When the Europeans settled on the ruins of the cities of Mexico, Tenochtitlan and Tlatelolco, they decided that the former would be the seat of the capital of New Spain, and the latter, the capital of the Indian lordship. Therefore, Cuauhtémoc, the last Mexica sovereign, in his ordinance, supported by the mythical origin of his city, for which the eagle perched on the sand island where the shield and arrows are located, was painted.
Y hagamos al creador contento. Al creador
Later,
del
when building
firmamento.
their church, they also endorsed its mythical origin by installing the same emblem on the front of the north portal.
Aliviemos este mundo del hambre.
The Church of Santiago Tlatelolco is built with the same stones found in the archaeological zone. Churches used to be built on top of temples and pyramids that were first destroyed. The same materials were used, and apart from that, it was something symbolic, like the religious place was now a new building to worship the new gods. It is believed that this is the first religious temple that was erected in the New Spain. It is estimated that it was built between 1525 and 1527. In the 1960s, human femurs were found in the figures that are on the pendentives of the columns. Also, the play by Andrés de Olmos, The Final Judgment, was performed here, in Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs. Summer 1968, students take to the streets of the capital. Thousands of people cram into the Plaza de las Tres Culturas. Some protesters even bring their children. In the streets surrounding the square, soldiers mobilize. Helicopters fly over the square. A green flare is launched, then an orange one. That is the cue. A bloody act is generated immediately, one that shakes an entire nation. The leading role of the students was met by a violent offensive by the state that led to the October 2nd massacre in Tlatelolco. During the months in which the students' movement took place, fatalities, physical and psychological injuries, arbitrary arrests, and forced exiles were recorded. The figures that have been given so far are imprecise. For more than 50 years, work has been done to reconstruct history through testimonies and documents from official and unofficial sources. However, knowing the exact number of victims has remained a mystery. Some say that we will never know. Through time, from the first contact with the Spaniards and due to the different events that have taken place here, the former ceremonial site of Mexico, Tlatelolco, suffered various razing until its remains were completely buried under the modern city. This is why we must be aware of the importance of the vestiges that underlie here. Join efforts to reveal and preserve valuable information about our past. In this case, on the one hand, of what was once the pre-Hispanic ceremonial precinct from Mexico, Tlatelolco. El Halconazo is another similar event that darkened June 10, 1971. During the government of Luis Echeverría Álvarez, a paramilitary group known as the Halcones attacked and massacred students. The president blamed that massacre on the emissaries of the past. The regent of the city, Alfonso Martínez Domínguez, was removed from office for that case. And although the president promised that the guilty would be punished, the investigations never led to the identification of those responsible. José Revueltas was one of the few intellectuals detained. He was imprisoned between 1968 and 1971. With the summer humor that marked his literature and existence, he spoke of those years in prison as the scholarship that the government gave him to study systematically, write without interruptions, and without worrying about the, quote, damn money, end quote. This is one of the scars of Tlatelolco. In this space was the Nuevo León building. The clock has a special mark after 7 a.m. to commemorate the victims of the 1985 earthquake, which occurred at 7:19 in the morning. Faced with the general astonishment of the government, the citizens came together to help in the rescue and debris removal actions. Even Plácido Domingo was present to help. Indigenous Museum, Old Customs of Peralvillo, and also Gabriela Mistral School. This enclosure was developed to provide interaction between indigenous cultures and modern society. Its function is to bring the expressions of indigenous culture heritage closer to the rest of the citizens. Far from being a homogeneous policy in Mexican indigenism, there were various currents, programs, objectives, and specific actions that changed with successive federal governments. From the beginning, it was established that institutional action should have as its object the indigenous community as a fundamental unit, and, at a second level, intercultural regions, that is, areas where several indigenous communities are articulated around a mestizo city or town, which functions as an economic and political nucleus. Both notions, indigenous community and intercultural region, were key in the territorial organization of the INI. Structured based on the network of indigenous coordinating centers. These centers were established in the headwaters of the intercultural regions according to studies carried out previously to determine their area of influence and the characteristics of the population they were to serve. The Garden of Santiago started as a botanical garden and is bordered by pink quarry. It is a copy of the Garden of San Marcos in Aguascalientes, since the architect of both is the same, Mario Pani. A monopter is a single-wing building, the most famous of which is the Parthenon. The one in the Santiago Garden consists of 10 columns. The inscription is taken from Cortés' third relationship letter, and it refers to the foundation after the conquest. As history teaches us, with war, everyone loses. Violence is not to be answered with violence. Peace is the way. We are one family. We share the same home. Let's build each other up instead of destroying ourselves. Instead of spending millions on nuclear weapons that only destroy and end lives, let us invest in mitigating the hunger of our brothers and sisters all around the world and who need us so much. Everything is enjoyed more in peace and harmony. An old wise man said many years ago, "Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Seek what is good before all men. If possible, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with everyone. Do not avenge yourselves, my beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay,' says the Lord. So if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink, for by doing this, you will heap burning coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity."